Good morning everyone. In this session we will be discussing about object-oriented programming principles. To call a particular programming language as an object-oriented, the following four principles has to be satisfied. The first principle in the form of encapsulation. Second principle in the form of inheritance. Third principle in the form of polymorphism. Fourth principle in the form of abstraction. So if these four principles are satisfied by any programming language, then we can call the programming language as an object-oriented programming language. So coming to the first principle. So what's the first principle? Encapsulation. So need for encapsulation. Let us discuss about need for encapsulation principle. So before we discuss about need for encapsulation, we should know about need of global variable. Need for global variable. So if you look at the need of a global variable, to make one variable common for multiple number of functionalities. To make one variable as common for multiple number of functionalities, programmer will be going with the concept of global variable in C programming language. So to handle this particular requirement, so what's the requirement? So to make one variable as common for more than one number of functionality or more than one number of functionalities, we programmers are using global variables for fulfilling the requirement. So global variable will be used by the global variables will be used by the programmer for making one variable as common for more than one number of functionality. But if you look into the scope of this particular global variable in C programming language, so global variable can be accessed throughout the program. If you are making changes to the global variable at one point of the program, its impact can be seen in all the areas where the global variable is used. So global variable will be used by the programmer in the situation when programmer wants to make one variable as common for more than one number of functionality. So this concept will be used in the C programming language for making one variable as common for more than one number of functionalities. So let us discuss about the disadvantage of the global variable concept. Let us say customer has given some 100 number of requirements. 100 number of requirements are given to the software company. Let us assume for fulfilling one requirement, if programmer is designing one functionality, so overall 100 requirements came from the customer company people. So to fulfill this 100 requirements, 100 functionalities has to be developed by the programmer or team of programmers. Let us say programmer 1 is assigned with the first 10 functionalities. Programmer 2 is assigned with the second 10 functionalities in the form of 11 to 20. Then programmer 3 is assigned with 21 to 30. So on. Programmer 10 assigned with the 91 to some 100 number of functions. So these requirements are handled by different team of programmers. Different programmers. So 10 programmers are involved in developing 100 functionalities. Let us assume function 1, function 5, function 10. Assume function 1 to function 10 are developing by the programmer 1. According to the customer requirements, according to the client requirements, if this kind of requirement came for the programmer 1 to make one variable as common for function 1, function 5 and function 10, then what programmer has to do? C programmer has to go with the concept of global variable for fulfilling this particular requirement. So let us say this programmer has declared one global variable in the form of int A. This was made in the global declaration section. This kind of statement was written by the programmer. If it is mentioned as part of the global declaration section, then this will become what? a global variable. Now this global variable can be accessed throughout the program. So which will contain 100 number of functionalities. Function 1 to function 10 are developed by P1, function 11 to function 20 are developed by P2, so on. Function 91 to function 100 are developed by P10 programmer. So this programmer 1, considering his 1 to 10 requirements, he has to develop function 1 to function 10. So according to the needs of the customer, he got a situation of making one variable as common for function 1, function 5 and function 10. Now in function 1 this global variable was used. This value was changed inside of function 1. Immediately its impact can be seen in all the areas where the global variable is used. So in function 1 I am using global variable, in function 5 I am using global variable, in function 10 I am using the global variable. So when I am making changes in the function 1, its impact can be seen in the function 5. So that value will be used by the function 5. Then changes will be happened in the function 5. A value gets changed in the function 5. Then after that I am making a call for function 10. Then in the function 10 I am utilizing A value. So A value which was modified in function 5 is consumed into function 10. A value which is modified in function 1 used into function 5. A value which was used in function 5, when it is modified, it is used into function 10. Now, if I am making the calls in the following order, function 1 call first, then function 5 call first, function 1 call first, then function 5, then function 10 was called. So, calling these functions in this particular order will give the proper result. But fortunately or unfortunately, if the programmer mind who is involved in developing the functionalities 81 to 90 functionalities are developing by the programmer mind in function 85. Let us suppose if this program is called as P9. For capturing a result of a particular expression, if this program is called as P9, some expression is mentioned. So this kind of statement was mentioned by the programmer 9 as part of the function 85. As A was defined as a global variable. Because of that reason, without declaring A inside of function 85, this variable can be accessed. So intentionally or unintentionally, if this programmer is utilizing A variable inside of function 85 without declaring the variable inside of function 85, if this kind of statement is mentioned, then as A is declared as global variable, because of that reason A variable can be accessed throughout the program. So when this function gets executed, A value will be modified because of this particular statement execution. A value will be modified and its impact can be seen in the other areas where the A variable was used. Now, after completing the development of this 100 functionality, let us consider the order of execution of the functionalities in the following way. First, I have called function 1. So function 1, function 5, function 10 requires a common variable in the form of what? A. This variable has to be utilized in function 1, function 5 and function 10. So first, A value is used in function 1, its value is modified. The value which is modified in function 1 is going to be used in function 5. Again, value of A will be modified in function 5, which is going to be used into function 10. So, when I am calling the functions in this particular order, function 1 followed by function 5 followed by function 10, we will get the correct output. But fortunately or unfortunately, if this function 85 was included in between these function calls, either in between function 5 and function 10 or in between function 1 and function 5, if I am including this particular function call, because of that global scope nature, the value which was modified in function 1 has to be consumed into function 5. But when I am making a call for function 85, the value which was modified in function 85 will be consumed into function 5. Actually, the a value which was modified in function 1 should be consumed into the function 5. But function 85 is also using what? A variable. So using a variable, what this programmer has done? Programmer has captured the result of one particular expression. Just for handling the result, just for capturing the result of a particular expression, this programmer has used this global variable. So when I am executing function 85, this value will be available for the function 5 instead of the value which I am expecting from function 1. So the value which I am expecting from function 1 will not be available to the function 5. So why it will not be available? Because in between function 1 and function 5 we have made a call for function 85. So if this kind of function calling statement is included in between this function calls, where function 1 value in function 1 A's value is required into function 5. In between that, if I am making a call for function 85, A value will be modified and this modified value will be available to the function 5. So what programmer 1 is expecting? Programmer 1 will be expecting that whatever modified value related to A was done from function 1 will be available to the function 5. But in between function 1 and function 5, here we have included what? Function 85. Now A value which was modified in function 85 will be available for the function 5. So because of that reason, it will lead to incorrect results. Why incorrect results are going to be generated? Because of the global scope provided by the global variable. What programmer 1 is thinking? Value which is modified in function 1 regarding A variable, that value will be available for the function 5. But in between function 1 and function 5, function 85 was called. When function 85 was called, what happened here? Just for capturing the result of an expression, this programmer P9 has used A variable. So global variable value will be modified. So when value of a global variable is modified, its impact can be seen in all the areas where the global variable is used. So immediately this value will be applicable. This value, the value global variable which was modified over here, that impact can be seen in the areas where, in all the areas where the global variable called as A is used. So after calling function 85, we are calling the function 5. So value which was there in A variable, so which was modified in function 85, that value will be available for the function 5. But what programmer 1 was thinking? Programmer 1 is expecting A value from function 1. But because of that global scope nature, we are consuming A value from function 85. Recent modification was done from the function 85, so its impact can be seen in the function 5. But programmer 1 is thinking what? He is thinking value is consumed from the function 1. But unfortunately, because of that global scope nature, even unrelated functionality called as function 85, it doesn't have any kind of relationship with A variable, is accessing the A value. Unrelated functionalities are accessing the unrelated data members. So because of that reason, it will lead to incorrect result or incorrect results. To avoid incorrect results, the concept of encapsulation was introduced into the market. So concept of encapsulation was introduced into the market. So what do you mean by encapsulation? Wrapping up of data and methods together is called as encapsulation. Wrapping up of data and methods together is going to be called as encapsulation. So what we are going to do? So based upon the relationships existing between the data members and the methods, based upon the relationships existing between the data members and the methods, relationships are going to be identified by the programmer or by the developer based upon the relationships, based upon the number of relationships. Number of groups are going to be formed by the programmer. Number of groups are going to be formed by the programmer. Now in the previous example, function 1, function 5 and function 10 are having relationship with A. A we can consider it as what? Data member. This function 1, function 5 and function 10 we can consider it as what? Methods. These methods which are having relationship with data members are going to be identified as one group. So similarly, we will be identifying the relationships among what? Among the methods and data members. After identifying the relationship between the data members and the methods, we will be forming n number of groups. N can be any value. It may be 1 or it can be 2, it can be 3 or it can be some value, some non-decimal value. So we will be forming n number of groups. So these groups will contain what? Related members. Group will contain related members. Related data and methods. Related data and methods together will be formed as a group. So it will be done by the programmer. Before programmer identifies the programmer will be identifying the relationships between the data and methods. So in the previous case, function 1, function 5, function 10 are having relationship with A variable. So these will be formed as one group. Similarly, other functionalities and other data members relationships are going to be identified by the programmer based upon the relationships. N number of groups are going to be formed. So each group may be containing related data members and methods. So these will be placed into a container like class. So the concept of class comes into the picture. The concept of class comes into the picture. To bind the related data and methods together, we are going with the concept of class. So in encapsulation concept, we were implementing the concept of binding. What do you mean by binding? Binding is nothing but what? Grouping of related members together. Grouping of related members together will be called as binding. So in encapsulation concept, we are implementing what? Binding. So encapsulation is going to be implemented with the help of class. So what is a class? Class can be defined as a user-defined type, or we can consider it as a container to place related data and methods together. So container will be in this container, in the class kind of container, we are placing what? Related data and methods. So how many number of classes has to be defined? How many number of classes has to be defined by the programmer? It completely depends upon what? Depends upon the groups identified by the programmer. If programmer identifies n number of groups, then programmer has to define n number of classes. If programmer identifies 3 number of groups, then how many classes has to be defined? 3 number of classes has to be defined. So class is nothing but what? Class is a user-defined type. Class is a container for grouping the related data and methods. Grouping of related methods and data. Grouping of related data and methods. So this grouping is called as grouping related members is called as what? Binding. Binding will be implemented with the help of what? Class kind of concept. Grouping of related data and methods together. Grouping of related data and methods will be called as binding. Grouping of related data and methods called as what? Binding. Binding will be implemented with the help of class concept. So with class, what we are achieving? We are achieving encapsulation. Now what happens? if I am defining the class as like this, class A, so here I am defining the A equal to 10. I am defining a constructor self dot b equal to 20, then function 1 so here I have defined 3 members inside of a class. So A is representing 1 member. In it I can consider it as a member of a class. Function 1 is going to be considered as a member of a class. Relationships existing between these members, we call it as what? Binding. Grouping of related members. Grouping of related members is going to be called as binding. Binding will be achieved with the help of class kind of concept. It is a container to hold the related members together. So how many members are defined over here? A is going to be considered as the first member. In it, I can consider the second member. Fun 1 is going to be considered as the third member. So here A is representing the class variable. Here in it is representing a constructor of the class. Fun 1 is representing an instance method. So totally 2 instance methods and 1 class variable was defined inside of class key. So how we are defining a class? Using class key. Using class key1 we are defining a class. So class key1 followed by name of the class followed by code. So inside of this class we are defining the members. So these members are having relationship with 1 member. A is a class variable, in it is a constructor, fun 1 is an instance method. Both are instance methods. So the next principle is inheritance. What do you mean by inheritance? Acquiring the properties of parent object to its child class. Acquiring the properties of parent class object to its child class object is called as what? Inheritance. Acquiring the properties of parent class object to its child class object is called as what? Is called as inheritance. Like how we are inheriting properties from our parents, similarly the members which were defined inside of the classes, if I am assuming them as the properties, so parent class properties can be acquired to its child class object. So if I am creating an object for the child class, then parent class members can be accessed with the help of child class object. Class A, def function 1. So here I am defining one instance method inside of class A. Fun 1 of class A. I am defining one more class in the form of B followed by brackets. So what does it mean? I am establishing parent and child relationship between 2 classes here. B is going to be identified as child class. A is going to be identified as parent class. So to establish parent and child relationship between the 2 classes in Python programming, this kind of syntax has to be followed by the Python program. So class base, name of the class mentioned as B. In circular braces we have mentioned A. So B is going to be considered as child class. A is going to be considered as parent class. Then I am defining one instance method inside of class B, function to print fun2 of class B. Now let us create an object for the class B. So B1 equal to name of the class is B. Some mentions. So when it executes, when Python virtual machine executes this statement, what happens? Chain of objects will be created. So using B1. So what is B1 representing? B1 is going to be called as object handler. Using this object handler, we are handling what? Chain of objects created by the Python virtual machine. So what are the chain of objects created over here? First of all, it creates an object for the object class object, followed by its immediate child class in the form of A class. A class object will be created. Then base object. The first circle is representing the object class object, second object is representing A's object, third circle is representing the B's object. So here I can consider it as what? Chain of objects. This chain of objects are going to be created by the Python virtual machine. When this kind of statement is getting executed by the Python virtual machine, what happens internally? As class A is not inheriting any kind of class, immediately it will be inheriting the object class. So if programmer do not inherit a class with any other class, then in such case what happens? By default, Python virtual machine will be inheriting with the object class. So A class will be inheriting the object class, B class is inheriting the A class. Now when I am creating object for the B class, internally it is creating what? This chain of objects. So first object for object class will be created, followed by its immediate child. So object class immediate child is A. So A's object will be created, followed by A's immediate child is what? B. So this chain of objects will be created in the main memory. So entire chain of objects, again we can consider it as like what? Object. So this chain of objects will be created by the Python virtual machine. So entire chain of objects we can consider it as like an object. It is going to be handled with the help of what? With the help of B. So when this object is written, to handle it, do we need some reference variable or not? So here I am considering what? B1. So using B1, I am going to handle this chain of objects. Now B1 dot I can access class B's members along with the class A's members because of inheritance concept. In general, we will be enjoying our own properties along with our parent properties because of the inheritance concept. Same way, we can apply the concept of inheritance over here. So when I am creating object for the class B, these members can be accessed along with what? A class members, because for B, the immediate parent is what? A. For A, the immediate parent is object. So using B1, I can access members of class B, I can access members of class A,